we're so used to doing things a certain way or talking about a certain product, or we're so used to it being so cookie cutter sometimes that seeing somebody else's approach, you're like, oh, I like that. Or, ooh, that was bad.
As we got new people on board, it made them more comfortable and confident knowing that there's some training meals, right? Like, oh, I've heard this, I picked up this makes sense. Oh, I like this. All right. I'm here today with Stephen Harrington, the diva of insurance. So you want to know something funny? Some people think you're British.
They think I'm British?
Yeah.
That's so
So I was
exciting.
like, hey, you have a new guy on your team who's British? And I was like,
No.
and it's like happened twice now. And I'm like, maybe is a video editor giving you a British accent? Maybe? I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know. Maybe because I'm so classy.
Maybe
Or maybe
it's because you're so
or maybe it's my teeth.
That's, that sounds great. Because we're here today, we're talking a little bit about sales training and how to onboard a new salesperson
Ooh.
and how to just, I think, do sales training in general, because you've heard me say this about 1,000,001 times, but for our listeners who haven't, I think in insurance, we do great training on quoting, but not sales.
Mm-hmm.
Like how to quote, how to underwrite, but then we forget like how to treat people like people.
What? We should treat them like real people and have empathy and connect with them and find the real reason they need coverage and build a relationship and then sell them something.
Yes. I think that would be lovely in my opinion. And I also think too, we kind of build quoting processes around our convenience, not what's best for the client. I thought it would be kind of cool because we just put everybody internally that sells at APP through some sales training. And obviously I created it, so I think it's amazing, but you had to go through it. And I thought it was actually, it was not hard to do, right? For those of you who listen to this, I mean, like obviously we have sales training, so I don't want to try to put us out of business, but I also think the training challenges and agencies are big. And I think everybody's been obsessed lately with process documents, right? Like let's document everything, screenshots, but we kind of took a different approach because we had all that, but people were still struggling, right? And since you kind of joined the team maybe about 6 months ago, maybe you can kind of share like, hey, because I think you had some aha moments too of like process documents are amazing, but when you're new, a process document, like you haven't seen the whole thing. So I don't want to put words in your mouth. Maybe you can share a little bit about how some of the aha moments you might have had.
So because we're a training organization, obviously we have some great processes in place. Everything's documented. There's a help article for everything. We can find the information all over the place. The struggle that I had was like trying to, I was like, I have to complete this form. So I'd be on a sales call and I'd be like, oh my gosh, there's 17 questions and I have to answer every single question right now. It turned into almost more of an interrogation than a conversation. And we talk about the same thing in like the renewal review and sales in general is take a step back. If you miss a question, it'll be okay. But you have to build a relationship and really start a conversation with the client. The forms are there to be helpful to guide a conversation and to help get information that we need, but really take that step back and build a relationship and have a real conversation.
Yeah, I mean, we have this lifelong process document, little screenshots and how to build a proposal and everything else. But I think that what the takeaway we had was everybody wanted to see understand it from start to finish. And then I could go to the process doc once I saw everything if I needed to build a proposal. But it was almost like the process doc, because sales is like, comes over time. So what happened is people would be like, I'm going to, what products should I recommend? They just go to that section, and we missed the forest through the trees a little bit because the process doc was so long. Or I remember many times being like, I can't find it in the process doc. And I'd be like, oh, okay.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
Oh, because you and everybody's brains work differently. So you think it should be here. I think it should be here.
Right.
And so, but now you've been here for a while and it's like, oh, that kind of makes more sense. I get that. So, well, I think we think all the process docs are the cure for cancer. They're a tool, but they don't complete sales training for somebody, right?
Like I love solving puzzles and I'm kind of analytical. So seeing all the pieces and how they worked versus going and just looking for that piece really was helpful. And I think too, sometimes in sales, we try to teach our team like this, or you need this, or you need this. And some people think in a different way where they're like, show me everything, show me what it's
Mhm.
supposed to do. And then I will be able to be successful in that path.
Yeah. I also think too, as we go through all the fun of figuring it all out, that some people like to see the videos that we do, right? And then come back and being like, when you hear it talked out versus black and white, like your brain reads black and white very granularly, right? Like,
Right.
and in sales, you have to sort of pivot a little bit. You know, there's a lot of gray area. So we've had some people who, no, totally get the process and then go off and do their own thing. And I'm like, this is a document. Well, and they use the document like 20% of the time. And then we have other people like maybe yourself who's more like, I fill out this form exactly because that's what the form tells me. And I'm like, okay, we got to be a person. Maybe fill out the form after the call.
Right.
We have it all recorded, so you're not going to miss something. And some of it, I think, is just like we call it all the time. It's like you got to get the wiggled out. So after your 10th sales call, all of it made more sense, right?
Yeah. And like one of the things that I also think is helpful is listening to yourself, listening to the recording, listening to like it's uncomfortable at first. You're like, oh my God, do I really sound like that? And it's like, yeah, you really sound like that. It's okay.
Do I have to?
I've come to terms with how I sound and I'm okay with it. But I mean, you like start to pick up things and you're like, oh, that sounded a little hokey, or, ooh, was that really the right thing to say? Or that was really good. I should remember that one. But it kind of helps you also just see how you're handling situations from the outside as well. I liked to rush straight to the solution because I'm a problem solver. So like I'd start talking to a client, they'd say 3 things and I'd be like, shut up, I got the perfect product for you. Right? Or, oh, yep, nope, can't help you with that one. I ain't touching that one. But that's not like that wasn't building any kind of relationship. So it was harder to close the sale because they didn't even know what the value was.
Yeah, I think that was like the teachable moment too, where, like, okay, there's a sales, like the steps are there for a reason. And I always encourage people when somebody's in training, you really do have to give people like 6 months to kind of figure it out and find their own way. And during those 6 months, you do have, like, as a leader, you have sale intention to people, right? Like, kind of guide and redirect and coach and say, okay, back over here. And you gotta let people sort of skin their knees a little bit too, maybe, and let them teach some things. So, let's talk a little bit about, some of the, how the training company might think, the baker's wife doesn't get any bread. And that's 100% true, by the way. We are a training company that does a terrible job training our own people. So
we're doing much better.
We're doing much better. We also are a company that identifies problems and learns how to solve them quickly.
Yeah.
So we put together our own internal sales school, right? So, and I think sometimes agencies might like not understand how easy this truly is. Yes, it was a commitment, but you can go get an online school for $100. They get your own online school for $100 a month. And if you're doing sales training, why not record every document so the next person that comes in is there? And then it's super cool because we had another new hire start this past week, and like, he's not in sales, but he's going through our other product training and stuff like that. And he's like, if I had this at Wells Fargo, I would have onboarded people so much faster. And I'm like, that's cool because we've had it for 20 minutes.
Right. You're the first one that it's been completed for.
Well, and I think a lot of people struggle with the idea of like remote workers and how do you train them? Well, the online school allows people like, I can watch his progress. He can leave comments and questions and there's dialogue. And I've kind of forgotten about it. And honestly, like there was a lot of work to get this whole thing up. But now that we're doing it with more people, I'm like,
mm-hmm. Well, and even where I was on the agency side, like we built out a whole onboarding process for new hires. And it was like some was video, some was live, some was whatever, but it had checkpoints throughout to where the team leader, the manager only had to check in a couple of times a day and be available. It wasn't like sitting at their desk for 8 hours a day for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Set some of our standards and showed basic processes. And it all started with one process, right? And then it was 2, then it was 3, then it was 4. But it was just cataloging it in a way that everybody could access and then we could go back and use. I mean, I think people get overwhelmed when they think of like checklists or training or whatever, because they're like, there's 400 steps to do. I was talking with an agent today and she's like, I want a VA and I want them to do this. Like it was like 30 items. And I'm like, that's amazing. You came up with a list. What's the top one? And she's like, well, I want them to do it all. I'm like, okay, so we have to create a process for them all. How many processes can you create this week? And she's like, none. And I'm like, okay, great. So how can, she's like, it's overwhelming if I think about 30 processes. And I'm like, right. So pick one. Get the video, make sure it works, have somebody else in the office check it, or have somebody else in the office make the video or the workflow or whatever you want.
No.
And it was kind of a light bulb
No.
moment of, wait a minute, I can do just one. And I'm like, well, if you do one a week or one every couple of days, suddenly you get like somebody can't absorb 30 new ways to do something.
Right.
So maybe
And
you get
honestly, you'll
five.
get tired and your processes won't be as good either. You'll be like, meh.
Right.
Kind of meh. So we break down our sales process training. So we broke it down into like all the steps. We did a video and there would be homework of listen to these 3 recorded calls as examples. And then it was be on 3 live calls. And then it was for each step of our sales process. And we put people who had been doing this for a while through it too. Like we put everybody through it at the same time. And then it was like, okay. So then, Stephen, who's been with us for a couple months now, like he had to sit on my calls for a while and you probably picked up a few things. And I had to sit on your calls and I picked up a few things.
Right.
Because then it's like, oh, I like how Bobby said this, or I like how this happened. And then you had to be on 3 calls with somebody else, like where you were in the primary and somebody else was secondary, just kind of watching. And so it got to a place where you saw that same call 9 different ways with 9 different variations based on client, person, etc. And what did you think? Like, did you find that to be pretty helpful or?
I think it was very helpful because it helped me see other ways to think about things as well, or other ways to solve a problem, other ways to say things that I might not have thought before. I think when we go in and we're so used to we're so used to doing things a certain way or talking about a certain product, or we're so used to it being so cookie cutter sometimes that seeing somebody else's approach, you're like, oh, I like that. Or, ooh, that was bad. Right. And it's always kind of fun to judge somebody else too. And be like, I would never do that. And then you watch a recorded call of yourself and you're like, oh, maybe I did kind of do that. Oh.
Whoopsie.
But I think it just gives a
Oopsie-doodle.
great way to also get experience in different situations because no sales ever the same.
Right.
Like you hear different
This is super
objections,
true.
you're learning other ways to overcome them. It's a lot of great ways to go through and just see different ways to do things.
Honestly, I think as we got new people on board, it made them more comfortable and confident knowing that there's some training wheels, right? Like, oh, I've heard this, I picked up this makes sense. Oh, I like this. And then, it takes a lot of that apprehension, especially with a whole remote team. I'm going to make this first sales call by myself. No one can hear. I have no lifeline.
Well, I know, like, when I was mentoring some people on some of the calls because I had been there longer, not that I was necessarily the perfect choice, but I was on the calls with some of the newer people, and like I would be messaging them, or they'd be messaging in a panic while they're smiling on the call, and I'd be like, "It's okay, cool. Do you want me to step in? Should I not step in? Like, what about we try this, or you need to slow down, or this needs to speed up, or let the client talk." So I think it was also helpful to you felt like somebody else was there with you, and so you weren't going to fail. Like you might make a mistake, but we could fix it together.
Well, I think another thing that, as you're looking at onboarding new salespeople, that we have all of our meetings recorded, right? Whether we have a note taker in our meetings, and so that transcribes it, and I can go into Avoma and try to find key points, and the AI actually will tell you the high points, the low points. We sort of obsess at APT, whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, about one thing, which is that first call that we have. I'm not trying to give away our secret sauce, but I always say, in our process, we have 3 steps. And that first call, it's super important to me that we are talking like 20-25% of the time and the client's talking 80-85% of the time. Right. And a lot of that is because we want to listen and learn. And our job on that first call is not to pitch. Our job on that first call is to identify and understand. Our tool that analyzes our calls, it's called Avoma. If anybody wants it, but I can actually see what percentage of time each person is talking. That's like one of the first things, like when we're coaching our internal team, I'm looking at is, hold on, like you should not be talking this much. Why? You're puking up product. The person is just like Teflon. They don't understand. We haven't made that connection. And I think that there's a lot of tools out there that maybe insurance agencies don't always think about when they're talking about training stats numbers.
Well, I think too that a lot of agencies just don't even really think about sales training. They just assume that people know
Mhm.
how to sell. Like they're
Mhm.
like, oh, but
Well,
their personality test came back and they're great at sales. They're a hunter gatherer. And I'm like, okay, great, but they know nothing about insurance, right? And they're like, but it's okay, we're gonna get them licensed in 2 weeks. And I'm like,
yeah.
okay, and then we're gonna set them loose. And I'm like,
And then like 3 weeks later, like they haven't sold anything.
right.
We gotta
And
let
I'm
them
like,
go.
so
We
like you're
gotta let 'em
sending them to the jungle with a gun with no bullets, right? Like
go.
we're giving them half the resource they need to be successful.
Or we threaten, do you know how much you're costing me? He's
Yeah.
like, well, you hired me, man. I don't know what to tell you.
So I think, I mean, having a clear process, having something that's working, even if it's basic at the beginning and build it as you go.
Yeah.
I think some of the more successful training plans come from starting somewhere and just being like, okay, that was great. Or, ooh, we should really probably go back and fix that one.
Yeah. I mean, I had to learn a lot by cleaning stuff up. Like I found stuff to clean up or like this was a typo or we need this email template because I was just used to being like, here you go. Like I knew what to say. But I think it's amazing how much you guys really want templates and you guys really want to be like, let's just put this all in here together so I don't have to, faster and I don't think too hard. I also feel like another thing that we did, which is having everybody have to role play. And I know that this is one of those like I go to my team and they don't like doing it. And I'm like, I know you guys don't like doing it, but I also know that we have to do it. So it doesn't really matter.
Right. One of the things that I see too is like sometimes you start the role play and it like when we're training and we're doing it with an agency, we start it and
Mhm.
then they actually start to get into it a little bit. They're like, oh, I get to be the mean
Yeah.
customer today. I'm going to put my mean face on. And someone's
Yep.
going to be like, I'm not going
And
to let Shannon be mean to me today.
it kind of like, I don't know, it makes it a little bit easier, right? Like it makes it more interesting. And I think that, the final thing on just like getting everything ready to have a sales person is, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? I also feel like the right salesperson is going to help you build some of this together, right? So they might not know what they don't know, but they can also take a video and then like identify it or pull together the script or start those collectively so that it is a group activity. And if you can do that, then you kind of have an unstoppable situation. If you really want to just kind of stay focused on, I have to have everything perfect first, you're never going to get there.
Well, one of the things I used to do at the agency too is I would have like everybody had access to their recorded call.
Mm-hmm.
And so once a quarter we would meet or every like month and a half we'd meet. And I'd be like, cool, when I meet with you, I want one call you think went amazingly well.
Yeah.
One call that was an absolute like oopsie. And one that was like, like you got the job done, but you probably could have done better. And I want to review
Yeah.
those together. And I want you to tell me why you thought each one went the way it went. And sometimes the call they picked is a horrible call. I'm like, there was nothing, like you did everything right. It was a difficult customer. Like, I don't know anything we could have done differently, but I'm glad at least you identified that you thought that went poorly. And sometimes
Yeah.
their best calls, I'm like, what made that one so special? But at least it gave them buy-in to open the conversation.
No doubt. And, I think we're lucky to be in a training environment where everybody wants to get better. But I'm going to tell you, like, if you're a producer on the team, and we've got a couple of these right now that I'm coming for you, if you're one of them, but
I'm clearly
like
defining your job role currently.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I think that the weekly plan is down. I'm like, cool. Like, you're a producer without a plan. That's ridiculous. You have your own one you want to submit, fine, but you need to leave. You need to come in Monday with a plan, otherwise you're just going to sit there. Or they write on their plans prospecting for like 4 hours, but no actual people. Like, and then you're like, so who'd you prospect? Well, I got busy. Like, well, you're not busy doing what? And then people who are like, I don't want to role play. I think you have to realize in a sales environment, it's a really toxic, negative scenario, and you need to get rid of that as quick as humanly possible. So that's our tip for sales training. Check out our blog. We have our weekly plan for producers as a download. So get that. You can check out what we were just talking about. And think of us for sales training. Like, there are definitely times where I hire outsiders to help us, right? So I don't pretend like I know everything under the sun and I want to get better. We have on our roadmap to go to like speaking school so that as we speak at more events, we get better. We have opportunities where we look at our proposals and we coach each other a lot. So I hire coaches and we're a training team.
Well, and what
And
that reminds me that like I just got done doing like 2.5 hours of training to speak at an event that I'm only speaking at an hour for because they wanted to make sure that everybody that was coming to their event was prepared to
Yeah.
speak. So they made you do
And they want a good
training.
experience.
Yeah. And I was like, at first I was like, this is dumb. Like, why do I have to do, I speak all the time. And then at the end, I was like, oh, okay, there were some good points there.
Some people everybody's got a different talent level, right? Some people are
Mhm.
speaking for the first time too. So, well, I have to go board an airplane to get home, and I hope you have a good rest of your weekend. Thank you guys for coming in. Check it all out. Think of us for sales training too. I think a lot of people think of us for management consulting or service, but we definitely have a lot of people. And I think if your team takes inbound leads, it's sales training. And, we have to get into a place where they're selling your value and, the value proposition and, who does this qualify and, how to do that. And that's all things that we bring to the table. So, Stephen, peace out.
Peace.